All right, so hello everyone. Here we have Jasmine Lawson today. She's a working at Giphy, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about race in the workplace. And Jasmine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Like Tim said, I work at Giphy, the world's largest search engine for all of the GIFs. You probably use our GIFs on a daily basis. They're found in Twitter, Facebook, Tinder. And my job at Giphy right now is the culture editor. And what that entails is making sure that through all of the great content that we have, that we get from the partners that we use, that I'm making sure that we have good, diverse representation within our gifts, because gifts are also media, and representation within media is very important. And we want anyone who's using our products and using our gifts to feel seen within our content.
Great. So let's jump right into it. Jasmine, what exactly is a microaggression, and how would someone recognize it in the workplace?
Yeah, so microaggressions, the way that I see them, are oftentimes instances or scenarios or experiences that marginalized people can experience in the workplace through other groups that aren't necessarily racist in intent or malicious in intent, but can make you feel very uncomfortable due to your race, class, or gender, or whatever marginalized community you belong to. So, for example, I'm a Black woman in the workplace, and I've dealt with a lot of different microaggressions. I change my hair a lot. And so, one simple microaggression that one can experience just somebody wanting to touch your hair, having too many questions about your hair, really coming from more of a curious place oftentimes and not necessarily malicious, but it does make you feel like an outsider. It can make you feel uncomfortable. It can make you not feeling like someone who's just wanting to be at their job, wanting to work and, pass through the workday and not necessarily have to answer so many questions about your identity. You were hired for a job for a certain reason and not necessarily to be the answers to everyone's questions. So yeah, that's how I normally see microaggressions. And those can be other things that also feed into certain stereotypes. I know I mentioned that, say, for example, based on their ethnicity, people probably assume you can eat or cook certain foods. People might make assumptions about what sports you like to play, or what TV shows you like to watch. People might change the way that they talk to you, certain slang and words, or they might try to use a certain accent when talking to you. And all of those things are not good. They're not fun to experience. But most of the time, it's not coming from a place of hate, as most blatant racism usually comes from.
So when you see a microaggression, what is the best way to handle it?
Yeah, I think the best way to handle a microaggression is normally to approach it in a way of having a conversation about it. I think a lot of times you might feel uncomfortable in a situation, and sometimes you don't have to necessarily be proactive and being the aggressor. I think sometimes people can kind of read off body language that, hey, that question that I just asked might have just been stupid and unwarranted. But I definitely think that having conversations, or at least, detracting from a statement like, hey, yeah, I might speak a certain language. That doesn't mean that I want you to speak to me in that manner. Addressing it head on is always the best approach. Um, for me, for example, simply saying, hey, please don't touch my hair. Or, yeah, I change my hair a lot. I have braids now. Like, it's not necessarily a big deal. Or kindly saying thank you when people have a comment to say. I think the type of attention you give the microaggression oftentimes is the feedback to someone who is the one giving it to you. People can feel body language. They can tell how you're responding to it. And I think a lot of times that's helped me when dealing with certain things. If someone's talking to me in a real like yo hippity hoppity way and trying to like relate to me a little too hard when they don't have to in that manner, I normally talk to them the way I would like to be speaking to. And people catch on easily. It's just, with most of the answers to my questions, it's not necessarily always a 100% sure way to go with dealing with race in the workplace. Everything is going to be situational, but I definitely always encourage being upfront about the ways in which you would like to be respected.
So that being said, as a person of color, are you expected to be a voice regarding all things regarding people of color and diversity and inclusion?
I would say no. I feel like you are an individual. You went to school for a reason. You studied a certain subject for a reason, and you went out into a workforce for a reason. In our everyday lives, we shouldn't necessarily have to take on both the oppression and to be the people that fix what's the cause of our own oppression. That's not fair to us, and it's nothing that you should take the burden on for. I definitely, like I said, I think there's a good even balance between demanding the respect that you're owed and going above and beyond to change people's hearts and ways of being and blatant disrespect. Hopefully there's certain people in place inside your company that you can take to elevate any situation that you feel is out of your control, such as HR or a recruiter or a manager or someone whose responsibility it is to deal with these things. But I would never say that you should feel like it's your sole responsibility to fix the racism problem in the workplace or in the world. It's not a burden that you should still take on.
So if a person were to come into an agency and maybe they were one of the few or the only person of color, how do you recommend they go about finding allies and advocates and people that they can talk to when they might be feeling stressed or fatigued?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend it. It's different for every company. I work for a startup, so there's only about like 60 people at my immediate company. So we don't necessarily have a lot of affinity teams or larger breakout teams to necessarily find these resources. But I do encourage, if you do work for a smaller company, to go to company happy hours or things that the company sets up for you to get to know your coworkers and really start organic relationships with your coworkers and the people around you to really, fill out who is going to be your ally. I definitely also suggest looking at your immediate team, the people you're working with on a day-to-day basis, really trying to find a good balance with your manager, the people that you report to, because I think the best situation always is that the people that you report to and the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis are also your allies. That always is a plus. A lot of times the people that you report to and the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis might not be your allies, which is the worst situation. But we're talking about the ideal. But if you work for a larger company, I know companies like Google and Twitter and Pepsi, they have so many employees across the globe that they have things such as affinity teams that are dedicated specifically to marginalized groups. So for Twitter, they have the Blackbirds, which is dedicated to the Black community at Twitter and the Black employees and their allies. Google has the Googlers or something of the nature that are dedicated to the same thing. And they'll put on certain programs and seminars and have certain people come and speak. And you'll be able to engage with people who are more than likely going through the same things as you in the workplace that can relate to you and want to be there for you. So I definitely suggest joining those groups if there are flirt to at your company. But I do know everyone doesn't have that particular situation, depending on what type of company you end up working for. But I definitely suggest going out of your way, at least in the beginning, to try to fill out the company. As well as I think I also mentioned the start of your job doesn't just start on the first day. If this is someplace that you're genuinely taking seriously, you should start to really fill out the company and your allies and how you think you're going to fit and fill in there the first time that you interview at the company. So these are questions you should be asking even within the interview process. Trying to understand the landscape of the company, wanting to know, the amount of diversity and how diversity is important to your company. That's a question. That's a valuable question to ask in an interview, so that on your first day you don't find yourself, lost for words of the situation you got yourself in.
That's great advice. As far as, you know, not having an ally or an advocate in your workplace, when it comes to getting a job, what do you suggest is enough on social media and isn't enough when it comes to talking about things that you're passionate about and what potential employers might see?
Yeah. I definitely think you have to be mindful of the types of companies you want to work for and their culture. Every company has a culture. I would definitely look to see the people that already work there. Look at their social profiles, the types of things that they talk about, how they tend to carry themselves. You'll notice that there's companies like BuzzFeed or MTV where their employees can be a little bit more liberal in the things they talk about and the things that they're passionate about, where someone who works for maybe like a Morgan Stanley or a banking company might not be as liberal on social media. And that might solely just be due to company culture and the way in which people at that company operate. So you have to be mindful of that. Like, okay, I want to work for this company. This is my dream job. What am I willing to sacrifice in terms of, my online personnel? If there's things that you're not willing to sacrifice and there's things you're super, super passionate about, you're really into certain activism and things that you want to speak up for, but you don't necessarily think that the company will be okay with that, those are questions that you have to ask yourself. You do have to weigh that within yourself of what you care about more. It is very hard question to ask. I've asked myself that question a lot of times to be very real and personal. I know that I care a lot about a lot of things, and I've gotten to a stage in my life where there are a lot of jobs out there. I know that I'm a very qualified candidate, and I know that if for any reason that it had to come down to my morals and the things I was passionate about in my job, that I'm willing to, take a risk to stand by my morals. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you are not willing to take that risk that you're going against your morals, but you do have to figure out that line for yourself. What are you willing to give and take? It is very hard balancing, personal and professional things. That's going to be the case for almost everyone. But you do have to realize what most of yourself you want to give, how much of yourself you want to give, and how much of yourself you need to reserve for other needs. So whether that's starting a private blog or what have you, or going out to places to protest and to talk about things, into seminars and having open, engaged conversations about stuff. Or maybe once you're in the workplace and you are very passionate about certain things and you found certain allies, bringing this conversation up and making your workplace a place where it isn't uncomfortable to talk about certain things because people are starting to engage in the topic. So it is a very hard choice, I think, these days, especially on social media, of like, what are you trying to engage? Sometimes just simply sharing certain stuff instead of making comments, and also just show like, hey, this person shares these types of articles. They obviously seem to be really passionate and engaged in this topic. You don't necessarily need to always state your opinion, but finding that certain balance for yourself is very important, especially if you are super passionate about things.
Yeah, I think that's really great that you suggested that. I have an example or of a situation for you. How do you handle
Mm-hmm.
a situation when you believe your supervisor might be perceiving you as aggressive or rude based on the way they talk and interact with you?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. How do you handle a situation when you believe your supervisor might be perceiving you as aggressive or rude based on the way they talk and interact with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when I've dealt with situations similar to that, you have to realize that even though the person is your supervisor, the person's also an adult and you're an adult, and you both demand the same amount of respect in any situation. Yes, the circumstances are that this person is your boss or your manager, and that comes with certain responsibilities, but that does not come with the responsibility for them to ever be rude to you or to dismiss you or your feelings about something in any way. So if you're thinking they're perceiving you in a certain way or in a certain light, and you're not necessarily comfortable with that, you should know that you're in the workforce, you're an adult, and you need to be able to bring that conversation up and to talk about it. You're not going to feel comfortable holding it in. It's not going to make the situation even better. You might not even realize why they feel the way they do, and it can really hone in a lot of resentment towards them, and it just doesn't necessarily lead to the best success in the workplace. You're both there for a reason, and that's to do a job and to do a job well. And I would hope that both of you consider that the most important thing in the workplace is to do great work. And as long as you approach it from that perspective of saying, hey, the reason why I joined this team and the reason why I'm passionate about your team and this company are these reasons. I would hope that you see that in me and asking questions like, is there any immediate feedback that you have for me on the work that I've been doing? Frame it in that nature where you're able to really just get a better gauge of how they are perceiving you, how they're perceiving your work, how they're perceiving working with other people on the team. Those are good questions to consistently ask a supervisor, especially in your one-on-one meetings with them, to really gauge, good feedback on your performance. And so I would never encourage you to hold those things back or to make false judgment or to, make an assumption of how you think they're perceiving you, but be very deliberate. Once again, demand the respect that you are owed as an adult and as an employee, and be very deliberate in the question that you're asking and having clear understanding of the circumstances around you.
So, piggybacking off of that, as a person of color, have you ever experienced being given a smaller salary or less work?
Is it a smaller salary or less work?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I do think historically most women and people of color have been marginalized into a place where you aren't necessarily paid what your counterparts are. That's very true. Have never known for sure if people around me who are doing the same work are getting paid more than me, but I've had certain assumptions that they have been. I've never been anyone to actually ask anyone, what's your salary, just to validate mine. But I do think, especially because those are taboo questions and you're normally not comfortable asking those questions of other people, there does come a point in time when you do actually just feel, you can just gauge what people around you, what the market is being paid, and you can feel it. This is the amount of work that I'm doing, and I should be getting paid more, and I should be owed more than that. And I've felt that several times throughout my career so far. At my last job, I knew that my team was so small, and myself and my counterparts were overextending ourselves all of the time, working very long hours, taking on so many more projects, more work than I signed up for at the start of that job, and that it was due time for me to be making more money for the amount of work that I was doing. And so when the time came, I think my boss even felt it, that it was due for me to, get a raise in my work. It can become visually clear. Now, it can also happen where you should be getting paid more and you're doing extremely amount more work and going above and beyond, and people might not recognize that. I do think it's important for you to hone in on that feeling and understanding, like, I should be getting paid more. This is the amount of work that I'm doing. Take an active note of all the things that you're doing, because on a day-to-day basis, like your supervisor and their supervisor and their boss have so many other things going on that they're not necessarily like looking at you on a day-to-day basis, knowing every single thing that you're doing, but you do. You know everything that you're doing. So you need to be comfortable to bring that conversation to the table as well. Saying, hey, look, I started in January and it is, December of this year. Look at all of this work that I've been able to do. Look where I've gone above and beyond scope of my job description. I definitely think this is a healthy basis for a conversation about a raise. So don't necessarily always wait around for people to bring that conversation to you. You should definitely be willing and ready, prepared to have that conversation. So it is going to be hard to gauge, like, am I getting paid enough? It's a question that you might not have the answer to, but I do, from personal experience, think you sometimes just feel it in your soul, like, yeah, this isn't right.
So that being said, can you talk a little bit about doing jobs that other people might not want and kind of giving yourself an edge up?
Yeah, totally. I do think there's a balance that you have to understand when you're first starting out in the workplace in terms of being a junior level employee. There's always just going to be work to do that other people aren't necessarily going to want to do. You do have to have an even balance of knowing, is this work within my job description, or am I going too far out of the way to do work that somebody else should be doing, that they should hire someone else to be doing, that's really intern level work that is necessarily like beneath my pay grade? Or is this work that I'm willing to do to prove my place in this company, that I'm willing to do work that other people aren't necessarily willing to do, and finding that even balance. I kid you not that a lot of times taking on certain work that people haven't necessarily gave enough time and attention to, looking at certain problems and issues, whether it's just the way like certain people condone meetings or put agendas together. You might think like, hey, putting agendas together isn't necessarily, the most difficult job in the world. But if the company you work for and no one ever knows how to put together, like, a really good agenda for a meeting, and you have a really smart way of doing so, and people start to adapt to your way of doing that, that's a good mark of saying, like, I've basically changed the trajectory of this company. I did something very, very small and little that ended up being substantial work into how we were able to get things done. So there's costs and benefits to those things. So you can't look at every situation as if like, oh, this is intern work, or this is just not, challenging enough. Because I've been there. I've been in tons of jobs where I'm like, I'm way smarter than this work. I feel way overqualified for this work. But looking back, I realized that doing some of that work has proven to people around me that I'm valuable in ways that other people aren't. And you're really able to really prove your value. And time flies by fast. Soon enough, you will not be the person putting the agendas together, and you will not be the person making copies of certain things or taking notes in the meeting, and you'll be able to, grow and elevate. Now, if time moves past and you're still in that space and you're still doing work, and it's been about 3-5 years and you're not necessarily progressing, then once again, like I think it's the theme here, it's time to have a conversation and to really, own and elevate, your value, your worth, and what else you have to offer.
So in the early years of you starting your job, were you able to differentiate between fatigue and burnout, between whether it was because you were just starting out and you're just getting used to it, or whether it was because you were a woman of color?
You said the fatigue?
Yeah, so sometimes I feel like you get to a certain point and you're just really tired, and
Mm-hmm.
some days it's because I feel like I'm constantly having to prove my worth as a woman of color in the workforce, and other days it's just because I'm still getting used to a more professional lifestyle. Were you able, or have you ever thought about how you were able to figure out whether fatigue was from one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I'm actively still dealing with. I really don't know how you find equal balance for that actually, because I do think that a lot of times, especially when you're a woman of color or a person of color in the workplace, you do from a very young age, no matter what you're doing, whether it's in school, education or school, have this, understand that you have to be twice as good, that you have to, consistently prove yourself because in a way you're a representation for your entire race, which is a lot of pressure. But it's a weird thing that I feel like is ingrained in most of us. That you really do have to go above and beyond the work that you do to prove yourself worthy. I think that for me, being able to not necessarily get my head caught up in that in terms of like the fatigue and what wears me out is more so knowing, the type of worker that I am, that even if I did not put any type of pressure on myself in terms of proving myself as a Black woman in the workplace, that I would still be doing this amount of work, that I would still be the person that would stay late, that I would still be the person that would come in early. I've answered those questions for myself that it's just in my nature to be someone who is an overachiever, who really is passionate about doing good work. And I think a lot of times the fatigue and, being tired out and with a job in the workplace, that kind of it's going to be there. Like jobs, they work you. But you're going to be able to handle it better, and you're going to be able to handle the fatigue of what it comes to being a person of color in the workplace better. The more you progress in your career and get to a sweet spot of the jobs you actually really love and care about and are passionate about it, a lot of those other things kind of just start to not be so heavy and at the top. But I will say my biggest advice to, fresh college graduates and people starting out in the workplace is that your first, second, and even third job might not be your dream job. It does take a lot of work. Even if you're at your dream company, sometimes you're going to have to be there about 5 years before you get to that sweet spot of this is the perfect job. You might start out as an assistant at your dream company, and that might entail you booking flights for your boss and ordering their lunch and handling their calendars. That's not necessarily what you went to school for 4 years for, but that assistant job is the foot in the door to the next step up to the job that you might really love. So there's going to be a lot of that, and that happens across the board. I know I work in the media industry, and that's just a little bit of the nature of how things go in terms of how you get your foot in the door. So the fatigue is just going to be there, but I do think both the fatigue of, being a person of color and the natural fatigue of just work do start to erode as the more you progress. I think for me, I'm very conscious and I think about these things all the time, even outside of the workplace, of how I'm navigating and moving through the world as a woman of color. But the more you just stay, in tune to the work, the passion, and, putting yourself in a place of what a job and a situation that makes you happy and, excited every day, the less that it's going to weigh you down.
So we talked a lot about fatigue. Let's switch the script a little bit. What are some ways that you replenish and refresh yourself and keep yourself mentally healthy for your job every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have a good work and personal life balance. You really have to, I know when you're young and you don't have a family, you don't have a husband or a wife or kids, your job can become your entire life because you are going to work 40 to 60 hours a week at this place. And that can really consume all of you. But it is very important to take self-care, to hang out with your friends, to take vacation time. My job gives me so much vacation time, and I was actually thinking about not taking a vacation this year just because I took a significant amount of vacation last year, but no, take vacation time. Tell yourself that these are things that your company is giving you. Your company is giving you personal days. Take advantage of those things. My boss is a really great boss in the way that he's a big advocate on mental health days, that you don't have to necessarily be actually physically sick, but if you're just not in a brain space to even be, a good, healthy employee for the day, then you should take the day off. Take time. Um, Take time to really, center yourself. Remember who you are outside the workplace. You're not just XYZ employee. You're somebody's son or daughter, somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend, somebody's best friend. This life is going to happen to you very fast as soon as you become an adult. People are going to get married and have children. Really make sure you're embracing yourself into adulthood and taking advantage of everything, other aspects of life as well, and making your life full. That also weighs down the burden of, not being so caught up in everything that's going on at work, because you'll be able to remind yourself that you have a greater value and importance besides just your job.
That's great to hear. I think that's all that we have time for today. Before we close out, is there any last piece of advice that you wanted to give the fellows as they prepare for their internships this summer?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice to everyone is to consistently just keep saying yes to opportunities. Don't box yourself in. Be very open to different types of companies. Like I said, I once worked in very corporate traditional companies, and working in a startup has been totally different. Just really well versed yourself in so many different types of working situations as before your summer starts, and really getting interested in marketing and advertising everywhere. And even within that space, just talking to as many people as possible, learning about other jobs. There's so many things that you can expose yourself to that you don't even know even exist yet. So consistently have conversations, learn about new things, keep saying yes to new opportunities that come your way. Don't be afraid. That's about it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine, for taking the time out of your day. Fellows, if you ever want to talk about diversity or what it's like working at an internship and being the only person of color, that's what the team is here for. We're definitely here to support you and kind of guide you through that this summer. And if you have any questions for Jasmine, just leave them in the feedback form and I'll make sure that she gets them.
Yes, thank you so much, Candace. It's great.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.